So there's a particular work, there's some legend around it, if you will, as it relates to the work itself. It is a book, or it's more written like an instructional sort of writing, in that it guides you through systematically in understanding particular concepts. And as I think about how to go to the next stage and the next thing that we're going to talk about on the podcast, I kind of look around and see what's going on in the world. And I think that at this particular time is no better time than to really help people to understand the level of their own empowerment, how they are empowered, and they don't really have to succumb to a lot of the chaos and the mental gymnastics that it takes to deal with what's happening in the 3D environment today. So let's talk about that. And this particular work is by an author called Charles Haanel, Haanel. And it was said, this is a legend piece, it was said that there was a guy who went to Harvard and wasn't particularly interested in college, but went anyway, and he ran across this book. Once he found this book, he dropped out immediately, and he became who we know today as Bill Gates. But this book had a lot to do with his role in becoming Bill Gates. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't really matter, but I will tell you this. I've read this book 10 times for a reason. It is very powerful, and it has played a very instrumental part in helping me to understand certain concepts and bridge the gap between religion and science. And it's been the only instructional piece that I have found that really has helped me to bring those two worlds together and make sense of them. So I want to bring them to you. And I want to give you a little bit of background before we start today. This is a 21 chapter book, I think. I have to look at it again, but I think it's 21 books. But it's well worth the read. And the name of the book is The Master Key System. The Master Key System. So the author is a gentleman named Charles Haanel. Again, his spelling is Haanel. And he lived between 1866 and 1949. And he was, of course, an author. He was American. He was a businessman, philosopher, etc. He was known, obviously, for writing this particular work that I'm talking to you about, The Master Key System, in 1912. He was an entrepreneur. He applied these principles of discipline and visualization and mental focus to his own business. He's a very successful guy. Haanel believed that the human mind, the tuition, was untapped. It was an untapped power. And by training your thought and your intention, a person could influence their ability. So that's kind of what the Master Key is about. It's instructional from the standpoint of he gives a theory, and then he'll ask some questions, and then he'll give you some instructions and things to do for a week. Each of these lessons, let's say there is 21, they were meant to be done within a week's time, and it gives you, a little bit of time to do these exercises before you go on to the next exercise. So it's very instructional. So the importance of his work is as follows. The Master Key System is considered one of the most fundamental texts in modern self-help and manifestation literature. It was originally published, I said 21, but it's actually 24, in a 24-week correspondence course. So it's really written like a college course. So we're going to go through it very similar to college course. I'm going to give you the literature, the oral piece of it, and then we're going to ask those questions, and then we're going to talk about the homework piece of it, the things that you will do within a week's time before we go into the next piece. It's designed to teach his students, or now you, how to use your mental discipline, your mental visualization, the universal laws on how to achieve personal goals and financial success. So his work emphasized these things, the power of thought, visualization and mental imagery, law of attraction, and systematic growth. The power of thought is that he taught thoughts are causes. Thoughts are causes and conditions are effects. Change your thinking, and of course, you can change your life. Visualization and mental imagery. He outlined practical exercises for imagining certain outcomes and clearly and vividly. This is a practice that later that was confirmed by neuroscience. And you'll find that most, if not all of this, is later on confirmed by neuroscience because science is catching up to metaphysics. Law of attraction foundations. Long before the term was popularized, Haanel was someone who described how focused thought and belief would attract a corresponding result. This was Haanel. Haanel was one of the fathers of metaphysics and this new, quote unquote, new age thought, which is really not new. It's just new to us, new to you. And then lastly, systematic growth. Unlike vague inspirational writing, it was Haanel in the Master Key system was structured as a very methodical thought process, how to accomplish these things. Each lesson, it builds on the last lesson. And that's why it was so impactful for me, because it led you through states. It led you through an understanding from point to point to point. So why does this still matter today, if not obvious? So Haanel's influence echoes still today throughout many modern self-help movements. So people like Napoleon Hill and Neville Goddard, people who also are in this genre, are still relevant. So Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, and then people like Rhonda Byrne wrote The Secret, and countless mindset teachers are credited for things that he really emphasized and led. From a premature standpoint, he was there at the offset of discussing these principles. And so you get to see them and hear them in things like The Secret, but really it was Haanel who brought this stuff to pass. His work bridges spiritual law, practical application. It gives readers and listeners not just inspiration, and I can attest to this, not just inspiration, but a framework for daily practice. These are applicable ideas and methodologies that you can incorporate into your daily life that can help you create change if you're not satisfied where you are. So, Haanel represents a link between classic wisdom and today's manifestation practices, if you want to take it to that point. So by applying this Master Key system, you can connect to the roots of many modern teachings, and you can gain tools that remain timeless, and they can help you to achieve the goals in your life. So what I'm going to do today is kind of introduce this idea, and I'm reading through his book on Kindle, and what I'm going to do, because again, I've read this about 10 times, I'm just going to highlight some of the areas that really emphasize his work and the ideology of why it was impactful for me. And then tomorrow we'll start with part 1, not really chapter 1, but part 1, because again, this is a instructional book, and it is written for us to follow in a systematic way. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that drew me to him. Here's a highlight in his foreword, in his introduction, that I really like, and in many ways it talks about what he believed. Everything and institution we see around us was created by human agency. It had first to exist as a thought in some human mind. Everything that we see had to first be in some human mind. Thought, therefore, is constructive. So he's very scientific and very methodical in that he has his way of breaking things down to a very simplistic level and helping you, whether you are a novice or expert or advanced or whatever, but really speaking to the common person to help them understand the power that they actually have. So again, everything that we see and every institution we see, it had to at some point exist in a human mind. Thought, therefore, is constructive. Human thought is the spiritual power of the cosmos, operating through the individual, the creature, the man. The Master Key instructs the reader how to use that power. That's what this book is about. And use it both constructively and creatively. This is why it drew my attention. The things and conditions we desire to become realities, we must first create in thought. We must first create in thought. The master key explains and it guides you through that process. That summary, that paragraph really encompasses what this entire teaching is about, why it drew me to it, and why I've read it so many times, and why I continue to go back to it. The reason, let me talk a little bit more in detail about why I continue to go back to it, because there are times in our lives where things are not going great. We get really focused on the things that we need to do to improve our thoughts and to improve how we feel about the world around us. And we get embedded and indoctrinated in certain methodology, and we stick with it, and things get better. Okay. Once things get better, we sort of relax. We're human beings, sort of relax. We go back into this, 3D type of environment where we're not so focused because things are not as bad. And then things get bad again. Then all of a sudden we get hyper focused on things that we need to do. Instead of just sticking with this modus operandi throughout, we just kind of come and go depending on how difficult things are in our lives. Well, this one paragraph summarizes this, not only this work, but why it was so important for me. Because once I got into it, it helped me to develop, first of all, understand, but to develop a personal process by which my thinking, my foundation was formed. And when you have a foundation that's formed, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. If you have created a undeniable self-concept, then it doesn't matter what's happening in the world, because you know that you know that you know, and that you know that everything works out for you. So whatever this is, whatever I see on the news, and I hope you're not watching news, but whatever I see out in this 3D environment, this must be part of that. Because I've already decided that as a foundation, everything works out for me. Everything works out for me. It doesn't really matter what people say. It doesn't really matter what comes on the news. It doesn't really matter what comes across social media, because I know that everything works out for me. And whatever this is, this must be part of that. This work by Charles Haanel will really help you to understand and create a firm foundation for yourself as it relates to your self-concept. And not just know it theoretically, but to know it from a systematic scientific standpoint. And if you are someone that was born in religion and brought up in religion like I was, then you can see it from a scientific standpoint, and he can connect the dots. Or vice versa. If you were someone that was not born in a religious atmosphere, but you're more scientific, but you want to understand from a religious standpoint, he can connect the dots there. Here's another piece. The student who learns the power comes from within. The student who learns that power comes from within, that he is weak only because he has depended on help from outside, and who unhesitantly throws himself on his own thought, instantly rights himself, stands erect, assumes a dominant attitude, and works miracles. Let me say that again. I really want you to get the impact of this, because this entire book has these sorts of just powerful thoughts that can encourage you, that can instruct you and empower you. So you're not rendered helpless or feeling helpless because of what's going on outside of you. So listen to this again. The student, you, who learns that power comes from within, that alone is empowering. Power comes from within, that he is weak only because he has dependent on help from the outside, thinking outside of himself, and who unhesitantly throws himself on his own thought, instantly rights himself, and he stands erect, and he assumes a dominant attitude, and then after this, he begins to work miracles. That's what this book is about. And this is why I wanted to bring it to you, because it has led me into where I am today, quite honestly. Here's another piece of the introduction that I highlighted. I want to share with you. Mental power is creative power. Mental power is creative power. It gives you the ability to create for yourself. It gives you the power to create for yourself. It does not mean the ability to take something away from someone else. So when you see things happening in the world, and you see that people are acting in a way that is uneven and unequitable, just know the universe is not going to reward that type of behavior. Yes, you may be able to get away with it for a little while, but we live in a cosmos, not a chaos. And not only am I relegated to the rules of the universe and to the laws of reciprocity, but so is everyone else. I don't care what your title, what your job is. You cannot purposely and intently create harm to others and think you're going to get away with it. But anyway, I digress. Mental power is a creative power, and it gives you the ability to create for yourself. It does not mean that it gives you the ability to take away or to take something away from someone else. Nature never does things that way. Nature makes two blades of grass where one grew before. And mind power enables men to do the same thing. There is plenty to go around. There's plenty to go around. I hope that what you've heard in this short podcast has excited you to hear more, because I wanted to wet your whistle about what we're going to be doing in the next 24 days, next 23 to 24 days. I love this writing. I love Charles Haanel. As much as I revel in Neville Goddard and Abraham and Basar and some of the other, Muji and Satguru and folks like that, it's important that we hear from Charles Haanel and that you understand kind of how this podcast, ReThink Podcast, even came to be. Because listen, I'll be honest with you, there is something to be said about suffering. And then I'm going to close out. There's something to be said about suffering. And suffering simply means you get to a point where you can't figure things out and things are not comfortable for you. And you're ready now to release what you thought you knew. You're ready to release these methodologies that you have created and these methodologies that you have learned from the outside world. And once you release these things, then a pure understanding can come to you. And that's what happened to me. And I will never forget, I was in the middle of a paradigm shift years ago. This is 15, 20 years ago. And I just decided that my current belief system wasn't working for me. And I grew up in a religious environment, and I just didn't think it was working for me anymore. So I said, hey, I'm done with this. I went on a family vacation. I took 2 books with me. One was the Master Key System. The other was James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. And on that cruise ship, I read those 2 books, or at least I read James Allen. Then I started reading Charles Haanel. And it impacted me to the point where I didn't want to leave the library of the ship because I was so engulfed in this reading. And so over the next 24 days, we're going to share the Master Key System together, and you're going to see why it really just encapsulates and it really embodies this podcast and the ideas that created this podcast. So listen, Charles Haanel, the Master Key System, I'm going to bring it to you in the next 23 podcasts, and we're going to really, really affect our lives. And that's again, the whole point of this podcast. I want to positively affect the way that you're thinking, not about other things, but about yourself and the power that you have. You have so much power. And I wonder if you really know how powerful you are. If you don't, hang around for the next 23, 24 weeks and you're going to find out. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. Come back tomorrow. We're going to get started with part 1. Thanks.